reality. When the earliest texts of Christian scripture were still being written, edited, sorted through, and designated as either canonical or spurious. My hope is that I can assume a vantage somehow innocent of any number of presuppositions belonging to the inheritance of later developments in Christian culture. In a sense, in fact, I regard this book as a companion to, or additional piece in the critical apparatus of, my recent The New Testament, a translation. If possible, and I say this not simply in the hope of further increasing my sales, I hope the listener can consult also the introduction and postscript of that volume, and perhaps the footnotes it provides for some of the verses mentioned here. Perhaps he or she might even read the translation in its entirety. I can vouch, if nothing else, for the good faith of the translator. I am firmly convinced that 2 millennia of dogmatic tradition have created in the minds of most of us a fundamentally misleading picture of a great many of the claims made in Christian scripture. And I hope that my translation, simply by restoring certain ambiguities I believe to be present in the original texts, might help modern audiences understand how it is that a considerable number of educated late antique Eastern Christians, all of whom were familiar with the New Testament in the original Greek, felt entirely comfortable with a universalist construal of its language. It is my conviction, you see, that the misericordes have always been the ones who got the story right, to the degree that it is true at all. That is not to say that they were all in perfect agreement with one another, or that I am in perfect agreement with all of them regarding every aspect of that story. I mean only that if Christianity taken as a whole is indeed an entirely coherent and credible system of belief, then the universalist understanding of its message is the only one possible. And, quite imprudently, I say that without the least hesitation or qualification. I find it a very curious feeling, I admit, to write a book that is at odds with a body of received opinion so invincibly well established that I know I cannot reasonably expect to persuade anyone of anything, except perhaps of my sincerity. The whole endeavour may very well turn out to be pointless in the end. I suspect that those who are already sympathetic to my position will approve of my argument to the extent that they think it successfully expresses their own views, or something proximate to them, while those who disagree, by far the larger party, will either dismiss it or, if they are very boring indeed, try to refute it by reasserting the traditional majority position in any number of very predictable, very shop-worn manners. Some, for instance, will claim that universalism clearly contradicts the explicit language of Scripture. It does not. Others will argue that universalism was decisively condemned as heretical by the Fifth Ecumenical Council. It was not. The more adventurous will attempt what they take to be stronger versions of those same philosophical defences of the idea of an eternal hell that I describe and reject here. The most adventurous of all might attempt to come up with new arguments of their own, which is not advisable. There is no obvious way of winning at this game, or even of significantly altering the odds. Even so, I intend to play it to the end. And perhaps I can derive a certain comfort from my situation. There is, at the very least, something liberating about knowing that I have probably lost the rhetorical contest before it has even begun. It spares me the effort of feigning tentativeness or moderation or judicious doubt, in the daintily and soberly ceremonious way one is generally expected to do, and allows me instead to advance my claims in as unconstrained a manner as possible, and to see how far the line of reasoning they embody can be pursued. For all I know, this in itself might make some kind of worthwhile contribution to the larger conversation, even if in the end it should prove to be a suasive failure. If nothing else, this book may provide champions of the dominant view an occasion for honest reflection and scrupulous celebration and serious analysis, and a whole host of other bracing intellectual virtues of that sort. Even if it should serve merely as a kind of negative probation of the tradition, the plaintiff's brief dutifully submitted by an advocatus diaboli, on behalf of an eccentric minority position, in full anticipation that the final verdict will go the other way, it may at least help the majority to